Every mirror holds a truth, but not always yours. Some reflect more than your face, they whisper your fate, and sometimes they show you someone else entirely. Rain fell like ash. The sky above Wrenwood was the color of old bruises, smeared purple and gray, thunder rumbling like something waking up underground. Julian Vexler had never planned to stop in Wrenwood. He was a 33-year-old archivist from Boston, tall, thin, a bit of a ghost himself. He drove alone, passing towns with names that blurred into fog and static on the radio. He wasn't running from anything. Not really. But something about the road felt safer than stillness. When his car broke down near Wrenwood's crumbling outskirts, Julian wandered into the town's only visible shop, a narrow, candle-lit place squeezed between a boarded-up bakery and a condemned chapel. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Whitaker's Curiosities, Forgotten Things for Remembering Souls." A bell chimed as he entered. It didn't sound right, more like the echo of a scream caught in glass. Inside, the store was quiet. Dust motes floated like spirits. The air smelled of wax, mildew, and old wood. Dozens of odd items lay tucked into shadows, cracked dolls, yellowing tarot cards, broken violins, melted clocks. And then he saw it. A mirror, taller than he was, leaned against the far wall. Its frame was twisted wrought iron, shaped like thorned vines coiling around a blackened wooden base. The glass wasn't quite reflective. It shimmered like water, like smoke trapped beneath ice. Julian stepped closer. The mirror showed him himself. But not exactly. His reflection was subtly different. Its eyes twitched too fast. Its shoulders slouched forward, and when Julian tilted his head, the reflection hesitated, like it was thinking before following. He froze. "Found something you like?" a voice croaked behind him. Julian turned. An old man stood at the counter, stooped, with eyes like tiny moons and fingers too long for his hands. I was just looking," Julian said. The old man smiled, lips thin and dry. "She likes you." "She?" The man nodded at the mirror. "The whispering mirror. She doesn't show just anyone." That night, Julian checked into Wrenwood's only inn, an ivy-choked stone building called the Hollow House. He placed the mirror in the room's corner, covered with a sheet. He'd bought it without knowing why. It called to him. The old man didn't charge much, said the mirror chooses its owner. Julian lay in bed, rain pattering the windows, just as he was about to drift off. A sound, soft, sibilant, like breath on glass. He sat up. The sheet over the mirror moved, just slightly, as if something behind it breathed. He stared for a long time, then, whispering, just beneath hearing, "You are not who you think you are." His heart pounded. "What did you say?" Silence. He stood up and slowly removed the sheet. His reflection stared back. Only this time, it was smiling. Julian wasn't. In the morning, Julian chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, jet lag. He almost laughed it off. But when he brushed his teeth, he noticed something. His reflection blinked out of sync with him. Just once, but he saw it. He tested it again, raised his right hand. The reflection mirrored correctly, but then it twitched, like it wanted to move differently but changed its mind. Julian leaned in, breathing on the glass. The reflection leaned in faster. "What are you?" "You." Over the next days, Julian became obsessed. He saw flashes in the mirror, Versions of himself doing things he hadn't done, screaming at strangers, smashing windows, choking someone in a stairwell. He stopped sleeping, kept journals, drew the mirror, tracked differences, and then he saw it, the reflection mouthing words while he was silent. "Let me out." His hands trembled. The mirror pulsed, darkened. His phone buzzed, unplugged, no signal. The screen read, "Do you remember who you were before the face?" Day 4. The mirror's not just showing me anymore. It's performing, like a mask slipping in and out of place. Julian sat cross-legged on the creaking floorboards of his rented room at the Hollow House. He hadn't left in 3 days. The innkeeper brought him food but avoided eye contact, as if sensing something unspoken had taken residence alongside him. Around the mirror, Julian had drawn chalk symbols, sigils he found in old books and forums buried beneath layers of forgotten code. They didn't help. If anything, the mirror responded to them, glowing faintly at night like a waiting eye. He flipped open the leather-bound journal he'd purchased from Whitaker's. The pages were now a chaos of thoughts, written in his handwriting, but sometimes hesitant, different. Letters slanted wrong, words spelled in older English. One passage appeared in Latin. He didn't remember writing it. Speculum est porta, non vitrum, quae transit mane. The mirror is a door, not glass. What passes through remains. Julian opened a new page. What if we aren't just looking into mirrors, but becoming them? What if self-awareness is nothing but feedback, a loop, sight seeing itself, thought thinking itself? And if the loop is corrupted, do we become corrupted? He dropped the pen. The room had become too quiet. No wind, no ticking. Even the street sounds below were gone. He looked up. The mirror no longer reflected his room. Instead, it showed a mirror version of it, subtly wrong. The walls were darker, the floor stained, and in that world Julian Vexler was sitting cross-legged too. But he wasn't writing. He was staring, smiling. Blood dripped from the corners of his mouth. "I don't want to be you." The reflection mouthed in silence. "You already are." Julian threw a blanket over the mirror, grabbed his coat and fled outside. Urgent rushed. The cold air hit him like a slap, sharp, real. For a moment he believed he was safe. Then he looked into a car window. No reflection. The glass showed only the street behind him. He staggered back, checked again. Bakery window, nothing. Storefront glass, nothing. Even a puddle in the road, no Julian. He turned to run, gasping for breath. But just in the edge of his vision, the antique shop window reflected something. Not the street, not him. Just Julian, standing still, inside the mirror, watching himself run. Julian burst into Whitaker's curiosities. The bell rang again, warped, like an old record skipping in reverse. The old man wasn't at the counter. Julian wandered through aisles of oddities. Taxidermy birds with 3 eyes, clocks with no hands, books that whispered when opened. He found Whitaker sitting behind a black curtain, motionless. "Why did you sell me that mirror?" The old man looked up slowly. His pupils were gone, his eyes clouded like smoke trapped in glass. "I didn't sell it to you. She chose you." "What is it?" Whitaker smiled faintly, measured with weight. "The whispering mirror is not a thing. It's an agreement, a pact. It shows what you cannot deny, what hides beneath your denial of self." "It's changing me. It's pulling me apart." Quiet, almost kind. "No, it's showing you what you've always been." Julian locked himself in the room. The mirror now sat in the center like a throne. Candles surrounded it. He hoped they might keep something out, or in. But the opposite happened. At night, the shadows inside the glass shifted on their own, even when the flames were still. He caught glimpses, shapes walking down hallways that didn't exist. The mirrored floor cracked like obsidian, and sometimes behind the other Julian, a door would appear. Julian wrote, hands shaking. It's no longer reflecting, it's leaking. His world and the others were beginning to bleed together. He'd wake with bruises he hadn't earned, with scratches he hadn't made. He saw them appear first on the reflection, then later on himself. One morning, a thin mark lined his forearm, wrist to elbow, a perfect straight cut. He hadn't done it, but the other had. Julian stopped calling it a reflection. He gave it a name. Quietly, the other. The other had started changing. It moved more confidently, smiled more freely. Sometimes it wore different clothes. Once it lit a cigarette. I haven't smoked in 10 years. Other times it wore a wedding ring. I'm not married. The other tilted its head, then mouthed slowly, Are you sure? Julian began losing time. He would black out, only to wake up standing in the hallway or staring into the mirror with no memory of getting there. Once he found his journal open, an entry written in his handwriting, but the words weren't his. You're a good vessel, Julian. You built the walls. I just walked in. He dropped the book. Something inside him cracked. What if I'm not watching the other? What if I am the other? One night, the mirror fogged up on its own. Julian stood and watched, frozen, as words formed from the inside of the glass. I remember what you did. He stumbled back, his voice cracked. I didn't do anything. But then, a memory surfaced. Not a nightmare, not a dream, a truth. He was 17, a girl. The basement, the dare. Locked the door. She begged, screamed. Emily. He buried it, for years. Told himself it wasn't his fault, that he'd meant to go back, but he hadn't, and the mirror knew. The mirror didn't reflect your face, it reflected what your face had forgotten. Julian stood before the mirror. You're not real. You're a projection, a trauma echo. I've read about this. You're a mental parasite. The other grinned. And for the first time, perfectly matching Julian's voice, if I'm not real, then why are you the one in the dark? The lights flickered, and the mirror began to glow, dimly at first, then brighter, like a flame rising behind frosted glass. It wasn't a surface anymore. It was a door. Julian reached toward it. His fingers passed through the glass like mist. It was warm, alive. Behind it, the other was smiling and reaching back. Julian stepped forward. The mirror no longer felt like a surface. It breathed, it shimmered, it waited. His hand passed through it, smoothly, like mist over skin. And then, his entire body followed. Silence. No air, no ticking, no Julian. He stood in a warped replica of his own room. Everything was wrong. The floorboards pulsed underfoot. The light had weight, like fog made of glass. The bookshelves bent inward, as though collapsing into a deeper gravity. And standing in the center of it, Julian, the other. But he didn't move like a reflection anymore. He moved like a man who'd lived here far longer than Julian had ever known. Julian followed the other down an endless corridor. Walls stretched and folded like breathing paper. Mirrors lined both sides, each one showing a different version of himself. He paused at the first, a Julian screaming at a therapist, another sitting in a cell, rocking, one floating in space, motionless, a version in priest robes, a version with blood on his hands. Each mirror whispered his name. He kept walking. They entered a massive rotunda, every wall made of mirrors. Inside them, Julian saw every self he'd ever denied. All of these are me? The other finally spoke aloud. They're what you locked away. Julian collapsed to his knees.
I didn't mean to forget."
The other knelt beside him. "You didn't forget. You buried." In the center of the room, a chair, a journal, a dull black mirror, no reflection. The other motioned toward the seat. "Sit." Julian obeyed. The journal opened itself, pages turning with violent force. Inside, dozens of entries in his handwriting, but from different eras, tones, voices. One read, "If I can't remember the sin, can I still be punished?" Another, "I buried her, and the silence never stopped echoing." And then, one final line, written just now in fresh ink. "There is no other, Julian. There's only what you would not be." Julian looked up, shaking.
"Emily."
He rose and turned to face the other.
"You're not me."
The other didn't flinch. "I'm not what you became. I'm what you avoided becoming." The other stepped closer. Its face morphed, Julian's childhood face. Then his father's. Then Emily's, screaming. Then back to Julian again, only clearer, stronger, whole. "You built your life on denial. Every good act was a disguise. Every kindness an apology. I am the part of you that never said sorry." Julian lunged. They collided, and in the struggle, the other grabbed Julian's head and slammed it against the dull black mirror. "Let me show you." Julian opened his eyes. He was back in his room at the Hollow House, but the air was wrong. The mirror pulsed behind him. Faint whispers drifted in and out of the walls. He crawled to the journal, grabbed a pen, and began writing. Not in English, not in Latin. Something older, something instinctual. When he finished, he looked at the final sentence. "I let him in." He turned to the mirror. The other was gone. His reflection had returned, but it was still smiling. He blinked, and in that blink, he saw the reflection, just for a second, somewhere else, behind an old woman, holding a hammer. "No!" But his throat seized. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. The next morning, the innkeeper entered to deliver tea. The room was empty. The mirror was gone. 2 weeks later, Wrenwood was quiet again. Winter clung to the trees like dust on a forgotten photo. Clouds drifted over a pale sky. Inside Whitaker's Curiosities, the door creaked open. A young woman entered, a university student in a green coat, architecture textbooks under one arm. She wasn't sure why she'd stopped. The road had pulled her here. The old man, Whitaker, sat behind the counter, motionless. She wandered through the narrow aisles of objects, books with broken spines, statues with missing faces, and then she saw the mirror. No price tag, no description, just waiting. She stepped toward it. Her reflection greeted her with a small smile. She hadn't smiled. Whitaker's voice broke the silence. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" "Where did it come from?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment. "She belonged to a man who forgot himself. Is it for sale?" Whitaker stood. "She's not bought. She chooses." She looked again into the glass, and this time she leaned closer. That night in her apartment, the mirror stood in the corner, wrapped in a moving blanket. The girl poured a glass of wine. Music played from an old speaker, soft and crackling. She stood before the mirror and removed the covering. The glass shimmered slightly. From behind the surface. Julian watched. He stood just behind the glass, expressionless, waiting. He tilted his head and whispered, though no sound came through. "She'll forget. Then I'll help her remember." The mirror dimmed. The girl blinked, and the reflection smiled. We live our lives staring into surfaces, mirrors, windows, screens, but we never ask the question, which side are we really on? You are not who you think you are. You are the story that survived, the version that felt safest to believe. But survival is not truth. Truth is jagged, inconvenient, unforgiving. The mirror never lies. It simply waits for you to stop pretending. The whispering mirror has already chosen you.